Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to AP Live. This is European History. My name is Todd Beach, and I teach at Eastview High School in Apple Valley, Minnesota. That's a suburb of Minneapolis and St. Paul. We're glad you're with us this morning. And this is Katie.
Hi, good morning. I'm Katie Lancey. I teach AP Euro at Coral Gables Senior High. It's a suburb of Miami, Florida. Happy Monday. We're happy to have you with us and to go over your really excellent responses to last week's practice. So let's go ahead and get started.
Before we get going with the warm-up, and as Katie said, yeah, we've got so many of you turned in DBQs to us. We're really excited to kind of go through that. We built this calendar over the weekend to kind of give you an idea of where we're going and what to expect. College Board has added a week, that week of May 4th. And so we obviously see today is the 20th. We're going to give you DBQ feedback. We want you to notice that the next 2 Fridays, we have DBQ practice coming. And then the week before the exam, we're going to give you DBQ practice on the 5th, DBQ practice on the 7th, and give feedback and exam reminders. And of course, your exam then is on the 13th to give you just an overview of where we're going with the next few weeks here.
Great. So today, of course, we're going to go over the various components of the document-based question and then get into our content, which is Enlightenment and Enlightened Despotism. And then again, reminding you on Friday, we're going to have that full 5-document DBQ for you to practice over the weekend. So again, today, Enlightenment, Enlightened Approaches to Power, which is going to really be talking about our enlightened monarchs, our enlightened absolute monarchs. And the next slide has sort of our learning objectives and our historical skills. And we encourage you, if you want to read through this, to pause the video and take a look, but we're going to leave that there for you if you want to come back to it.
All right, thank you, Katie. We'll get into our warm-up today. And this was your task on Friday, to write the modified 5-document DBQ essay response. Time yourself if you wanted to. And for those that are joining us today, if you weren't with us on Friday, you can go to Friday's video. And in the description on the YouTube page, in the description, you may have to click show more, but you will see downloads for the DBQ that we wrote, as well as the modified rubric. So we're going to go through some of those samples that we pulled today. Almost 200 samples came into us over the weekend, and some were still coming in this morning. So first of all, thank you for doing this. We're trying to pull samples, give you feedback. What I suggest you do right now is to get your DBQ, if you wrote one, get your DBQ out in front of you and start comparing what against the samples that we're going to show you here in just a moment. It'd be also a great idea to have a rubric in front of you so that you can kind of internalize that rubric. Did I do this? Checking against the work that I've done. So that's a good way to go through this. So we obviously can't go through 200 samples, but that's a good way for you to kind of see how am I doing in comparison to others. All right, so we'll begin with this one. We're going to start with context and thesis up here. And again, here was our prompt: evaluate whether or not Catholic Church in the 1600s was opposed to new ideas in science. So when we get a task word that says evaluate, what we want you to do is to look at the evidence and take a position. Was the Catholic Church opposed to new ideas, or were they not opposed to new ideas? Based on the evidence that you're looking at, evaluate that evidence, take a position, and then make your argument. And this response comes from Jennifer at Benjamin and Cardozo High School in Queens. And Jennifer, you gave us a good response to learn from. I loved reading this because you can see the thinking on the page. It was so good to really look at and diagnose. So in the blue here, she's going to definitely earn the point for contextualization. Begins really broadly, starts with the Renaissance. Remember, we're going into the 1600s and the entrance of scientific revolution. So Jennifer writes, the Renaissance was a time period where people let their curiosity flourish and question past beliefs instead of following tradition and just abiding by them. This evolved in the scientific revolution from the 16th to the 18th century, where people intensified their investigations. See how she's begun broadly and she's narrowing this down, this context, intensified their investigations and began to conduct their own experiments and used mathematics to understand their dilemma. This often led to new discoveries which contradicted traditional ones. That's a preview there. That's really like that. Usually in accordance with the teachings of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church often opposed new ideas in science that were discovered in the 1600s though some members of the Catholic Church did not take part in some of these experiments. So this is Jennifer's attempt at claim right here in the introduction. And the Catholic Church opposed new ideas in science. We have a position, and what I was really wondering about is, do we have a line of reasoning? So Katie has been doing a great job of trying to teach us that we really kind of need a because statement, or something that kind of identifies a line of reasoning. And right here, we've got that they were discovered in the 1600s, though some members of the Catholic Church did not take part in some of these experiments. So I'm going to say at best, this is kind of a vague line of reasoning, but Jennifer is doing this, as all of you will be doing it, kind of a first draft. And so I also remember Katie saying, being really explicit on Friday, saying, make sure that you are, when you get to your conclusion, that you restate that thesis and that you get back to trying to say it a little bit differently. You can really tell that Jennifer has thought through this as she wrote it. And then this is the concluding paragraph. It was common for the Catholic Church to oppose new ideas in science because this oppose new ideas. This is where Jennifer has definitely taken a position. We have this because statement because they were not in accordance with their tradition. If their tradition was challenged, that's one of our lines of reasoning, and proved inaccurate, then it would minimize their influence. That's another line of reasoning, which is what was very important to them in the 1600s. So if we were at the reading, this would be one of the, right here, I would go, I'm not sure I've got a really good line of reasoning, but we're supposed to check, do they have the line of reasoning when they get to the conclusion as well? I'm so glad that Katie made that point to you on Friday, because here it is, super clear, definitely going to earn the point for thesis and claim. This one is not as clear, but again, you guys are writing these as first drafts. I mean, you can see Jennifer's thinking on the page as she's working this out. And then by the time we got to the end, she's got it all sorted. It's just really well done by the time we get there. So Jennifer, you've given us a great example to learn from, and I really appreciate that you submitted your ideas here in the DBQ. One more for context and thesis from Elizabeth at Red Hook High School in New York. Again, this is her introductory paragraph. Prior to the scientific revolution, the majority of scientific knowledge was centered around the Catholic Church. Thomas Aquinas had converted ancient Greek philosophers Aristotle's beliefs to abide with the Catholic faith. One of the main principles was this geocentric theory, stating that all celestial bodies of the universe revolved around the earth. Any individual who dared speak out against the Catholic Church was deemed a heretic, as Nicholas Copernicus later would be. Here's where we have, that is contextualization. That's really well done, Elizabeth. You're going to earn the point right there. And then here's our thesis or claim. Overall, it can be concluded that the Catholic Church in the 1600s was often opposed to new ideas. Takes a position right there, was opposed to new ideas because of their condemnation of discoveries and inability to separate reason from religion. There we have our line of reasoning for the thesis. This is really well done, Elizabeth. Red Hook High School in New York. Thank you for submitting that.
That's great. I'm really glad that you reminded them about the conclusion, Todd, because we know that time is going to be such an issue, and we know that students are concerned. And starting off, they kind of jump into it, but they really realize what they were trying to say and argue more articulately by the end. So keeping in mind that thesis and the conclusion is really important. So for evidence for our part C in the rubric, I want to remind you there are 5 total points in evidence. 3 of those points come from the documents. And what I'm demonstrating, a couple examples today, are examples of document usage that we could get credit for supporting an argument. And there are 2 possible points that you're going to get, actually 3, because you'll have done that low bar point 1, but we really want to model supporting an argument rather than just using documents on the topic, which is that first point. So if you do this 2 times with documents supporting an argument, you'll get 2 points for the evidence. And if you do it with 4 of the documents, you're looking for 3 points with the evidence. So this is from Maddie at Somerville High in California. And Maddie starts off, the Catholic Church did not want to prove the scripture to be false, which is why the church opposed new scientific ideas. That was a topic sentence for this paragraph. And then Maddie goes on to talk about the actual document. The Catholic Cardinal Bellarmine responds to the Catholic monk's claims, reaffirming that the sun is at the center of the universe and that it prohibited to interpret the scripture of the whole of the Catholic Church. The cardinal completely refutes that any new scientific ideas because they challenge what is said in the Bible. Cardinal Bellarmine does not support new scientific ideas because they prove the scripture false, thus showing the church opposed new scientific ideas. So here's a really nice job with that document number at the end, where they have taken this document and they are definitely supporting an argument about the church not opposing the new ideas in science. So that's a really nice job talking about the content of the document and then bringing the document back to what the argument was. So very nice job, Maddie. And then this is a shorter one because there's a lot of students that emailed us and you're really worried about time, and I know that. So I wanted to talk about this one, which is the image. And this is from Sophie in Neuqua Valley High School in Illinois. And Sophie writes, although the church took steps to discredit scientists and their ideas, there were Catholics who supported new studies. Again, a nice topic sentence. Christopher Scheiner, a German Jesuit astronomer, like the attribution there, is depicted using a telescope to study the positions of planets and stars. Therefore, people's religion did not stop them from pursuing the sciences. Document 4. Again, that little nod to what the argument is. They explained the image very briefly, but it's accurate, and then gave a nod to how they are using that evidence as part of their argument, ending with that nice best practice of putting the document number to keep the reader organized and to keep you organized while you're writing your essay. So I really like that. Sophie, good job with that. And then if you remember, there are 2 points after using the documents that a student can get on this year's DBQ for using evidence beyond the documents. And Galileo was our number one brought in piece of outside information. And this is from Phoebe in Central Bucks High School, East Pennsylvania. And so Phoebe did a very nice job of weaving that example in and making it relevant to the argument that Phoebe was using during the time she brought in this outside piece of information. So let's read through it. Another example of the Catholic Church suppressing modern science was the trial of astronomer Galileo Galilei, who challenged Aristotle's ideas on a heavenly earth and depicted the moon as being imperfect. As a result of his scientific work, Galileo was put on trial, found guilty, and forced on house arrest. The Catholic Church would not invalidate its actions until centuries later. Again, the Catholic Church attempted to suppress the work of modern sciences. So we have that there, and a very nice example of Phoebe using an outside piece of information, but weaving that really nicely into the argument. So great job there. And then we have a response from Carol in Tesoro High School, also in California. And another example of taking a piece of outside info and weaving that into the argument. Furthermore, the Index of Prohibited Books was formed in 1559, concurrent with the Roman Inquisition. This banned any work that went against the Catholic Church and its teachings. Many works during the scientific revolution that broke with traditional thought were banned, such as Copernicus's On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres, that presented the heliocentric theory that contradicted traditional thoughts of Ptolemy and Aristotle. Therefore, the church did not support these ideas. Again, not in the documents. Another nice piece of information that is woven into that argument and is relevant to the argument about the prompt, not included. 2 really nice examples of how you can bring in outside information. So very good job with that.
Really appreciate that you brought those samples in, Katie, because so often we see students throw in a piece of outside evidence, but they don't really give us another sentence to tell us that that's connected to the prompt. It really should be explicit like that. And you're the writer, and I would say you're the writer, you're the one in power. You can do that, and don't leave it to the reader to try and interpret what you meant. Do what you mean to do. So really nice job on those samples. Okay, we're going to look at sourcing. This is in the D category. And again, I'm going to ask you, if you don't have your DBQ in front of you and you wrote it, please do, because this is a chance to compare what you've done against these samples and then see, did I do that? Does that match? Am I getting close to where these points are? So it's a good way to start thinking about this. This response is from Cayetana from Palmetto High School in Miami. Again, we're looking at, what's that?
Sorry, that's my alma mater. I have to.
Oh, okay. Well, go Palmetto. There we go. This is the analysis, the D1, the sourcing point. And this one is really, really nice. By the way, I'm going to say that this school, they always have somebody turning stuff in. So I really appreciate that they're listening and paying attention. And I hope we're giving you something. They must be learning something. They keep coming back. So let's take a look at this one. I tried to just break down this paragraph so everybody could see the different pieces that are going on. We've been talking a lot about attribution. Katie showed examples of attribution. And although there's nothing on the rubric that says you have to do attribution, we want our skills that we're learning to transfer. We want to be good writers. This is what good writers do. When good writers introduce an argument and use evidence that is from someplace else, they have to do an in-text citation and clearly attribute that evidence. And so it's just good writing. And so that's why I really appreciate that students are doing this. And the response says, this is further emphasized by Cardinal Bellarmine's letter in response to Foscarini in 1615. This comes straight from the source line, and the writer is using that as attribution, as he illustrates the response to such changes from a higher rank in church hierarchy. The cardinal responded with hesitation to the spread of Copernicus' theory, as it might cause disruption in the church. He asked for greater evidence in proving the validity of Copernicus' statements, and then the church would have to comply with changes in their interpretation of the Holy Scriptures. Right here in the green, what I've done is what the writer has done is given us a brief description of what's in the document. This is a summary of what's in the document. And then they give us a brief explanation. This illustrates the church's hesitant attitude towards the rapid and drastic changes, but never completely isolating the validity in these new ideas. And here's where we get this analysis, this addressing point of view. As a cardinal, Bellarmine should be cautious in his statements, as his words deem of great importance to members in the lower ranks of the church. He must hold the church's authority and word to the highest level. Thus, he is vigilant in his choice of words and opinion. That is really fleshed out really well. And then one thing as Katie was saying, we would like to see you put the document number at the end. And again, there's nothing on the rubric that says you have to do that, but this is what good writers do. They give us an attribution line, they work this document, they tell us what it means, and then they give us that proper citation at the end. So really nice job there from Cayetana. This response is from Ian at Central High School in South Dakota. Again, we're looking at sourcing D1 in a letter written by Cardinal Bellarmine to Paolo Antonio Foscarini in 1615. There's our attribution line. Bellarmine writes how heliocentric theory was wrong and dangerous to the church. He points out that in the Council of Trent, the church agreed not to interpret scripture, but instead read it as it is, and the Bible clearly states the earth is the center of the universe. Ian's given us a description of what is in the document itself. So you're starting to see a pattern of these really nice responses. We start with this attribution piece, we have a description, then a brief explanation. This shows that the Catholic Church denied heliocentric theory and fought vigorously to prove it was false. And then we get the analysis. The point of view. I love that we're just using the language. You're going to put it right out there for the reader. The point of view of this letter, Cardinal Bellarmine, a high-ranking Catholic Church member. His job was to support the papacy, which denied heliocentric theory. That is important because we keep telling you to do HAP, historical situation, audience, purpose, point of view, and then we say do the why, make it happy. The why is it important? And Ian has just put it out there. This is important because his opinion is biased, and even if he thought the heliocentric was real, he would never say at the risk of being tried as a heretic. And then Ian put the document number at the end, closing with that. That's structured so well. You can see the pattern in the previous one and this one. We have the attribution line, a brief description of what's in the documents, a one-sentence explanation of what the student believes is being said in the document, and then this analysis and this point of view right here and why it's important. That's really structured really well. Ian, I know you're a teacher, Mr. Hansen. He's taught you well. That's a really nice response. All right, and now we'll get into complexity. And I just have one sample for complexity. As Katie said, we're getting a lot of questions with your DBQs because a lot of you timed yourself, and some of you are saying, oh my gosh, it's taking me a lot longer than I thought. Just a couple of reminders. We're going to give you some strategies to speed that up, but also we've got 4 more DBQs to practice on coming up, right? So skill-based tasks, you need to practice to get better at them. And so we're going to break down the tasks throughout the week, and then we'll give you the full practice at the end. There's a lot in front of you. We got time and you're going to get this. I just know it. So here's the complexity point. It'd normally be called D2, but on this modified rubric, it's D3. This is a response from Marie at Haynes Academy in Louisiana. This is Marie's third body paragraph. Remember, Katie had given you the structure. It said you can make a choice, make a decision. Are you going to try for the complexity point? We recommend, because of the situation you're in, that you try that as a third body paragraph. That there are lots of ways to get at it, but this is the one that we structured out for you. So Marie writes, although the main church was against these new scientific discoveries, many individuals within the church supported these ideas and were indeed scientists themselves. So I really highlighted that because now we've got a different argument that's going on. It's relevant, it's insightful connection across the time period, or if you prefer, again, looking at the rubric, we could call this nuance by analyzing multiple variables. Either one will work for this. German Jesuit mathematics professor Christoph Dreinberger in Rome said that taking these ideas as true did not mean they were against the church, and he should still study them, even as a Jesuit. Doc 3, nice job. We've given a description of the document, and we've cited the document after we gave that attribution. Another German Jesuit astronomer, Christoph Schreiner, is seen in an illustration studying sunspots, which also supports his belief in these new scientific ideas, Doc 5. So Marie argued, the main part of her argument was that the Catholic Church was opposed to these new ideas. And then she's given us she's interpreted these two other documents saying, hey, but you got to look at this. Some of these people were scientists themselves. Their role as Jesuits is especially as important as they are Catholic purists seen as warriors of God. So if they supported the scientific studies, then it is likely that many others did as well. Marie also is going to get a point there for point of view for sourcing that document right there. So this is a way to get at complexity. And she did a really great job of doing that right there as well. Okay. Thank you. I hope that looking at those samples in comparison to your own, and you can pause the video, you can go back and look at it again. We hope that was really helpful. Give us some feedback. That we on our Twitter account @LearningEuro, we put up a survey this morning. Tell us what you think about the samples. Was it helpful to you for your learning?
All right, so we've been saying this over and over, but I want to remind you that we are doing review here. And so the idea of buzzing through the Enlightenment in a couple of minutes is something we would not usually do during our normal classes. So we're just going to try to go through and hit the highlights, the things that are in our curriculum framework that you need to know. And we start off with that A paragraph, which is really just the contextualization of the Enlightenment. Todd did some broad things with that when we did the scientific revolution the other day. But the idea is for you to see the bridge that the scientific revolution contributes to a series of debates in the 18th century known as the Enlightenment, and that intellectuals will begin to apply many of the principles of the scientific revolution to society and human institutions. So we're going to see this bridge from the scientific revolution to the Enlightenment. And then in B, along with that, we have our sort of early Enlightenment people that are really doing their work in the 17th century, but serve as the foundation and the groundwork for the Enlightenment. And that is particularly John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. They are both had philosophies that are based on the concepts of natural law, and they both articulate ideas regarding a social contract. So if we start with Thomas Hobbes, and I contemplated putting his image of the Leviathan up there, which is a really interesting cover illustration to his work that you can Google if you want to stop and take a look at it. But he's very negative about the nature of man. He believes that humans would compete violently for power and wealth if they were left to themselves. So in his work, Leviathan, he outlines his idea of the social contract in which all members of society are ruled by an absolute monarch, and the absolute monarch is charged with maintaining peace and order. So he thinks that we need that absolute monarch to check the negative impulses that people have. And John Locke will disagree with that negative nature view of man. And he believes that man is basically rational. And that idea of being rational and reason, the Enlightenment is frequently in your textbooks called the Age of Reason. So we're going to have reason be the measure of everything going forward. And he articulates these natural rights of life, liberty, equality, and property that come prior to the development of a society. So he writes, in his second treatise on government, which he's writing after the Glorious Revolution as a strong defense of the Glorious Revolution, he says that the social contract should be one where the government provides order and arbitrates disputes, but he also talks about how it can be removed if it becomes abusive to these natural rights. So we're going to see that setting up the right of rebellion, and we'll talk about that more later in things like the American Revolution and the French Revolution. And then Locke also wrote an essay concerning human understanding in 1690. And it's there that he's talking about how people are not born with innate ideas, as Descartes says, but rather he's going to talk about human beings learning from experience, being born as a tabula rasa, or a blank slate. So, and that's a very optimistic view for him, as how people are going to learn. It will have implications on things like early childhood education and things like that. And there's our picture of John Locke there on the right. And then just on the next slide, to highlight just a few of the major people that are in our curriculum very briefly. I really like the image that's on the right. It's I've seen it called the Philosopher's Dinner. I think it actually translates to the Patriarch's Last Supper. And there's Voltaire in the background of the picture there with his arm up, presiding over this dinner of philosophes that includes people that we're going to talk about here on our slide. So the philosophes as a group are this idea of intellectuals in France that are bringing the light of reason to their fellow human beings. And we want to talk about France because the center of the Enlightenment is definitely Paris. The philosophes are wanting to reach a larger audience of elites. So let's just talk quickly about some people. We have Montesquieu, and Montesquieu writes his very important work, The Spirit of Laws, in 1748. He, in this, talks about his favor for government like Britain, where it has a separation of powers and checks and balances. This is not quite the same separation of powers that's going to be adopted in our Constitution, but certainly the concept there is going to be brought forward as to try to not let one political interest have too much power. And then Voltaire, who is probably the most famous philosopher. He's known for his sarcastic wit, his commitment to intellectual freedom, which will get him both admiration and resentment. He'll get in trouble for it. He'll end up having to leave France for a while and go and live in Great Britain, where again, like Montesquieu, he very much favors that form of government. He is a fierce proponent for religious toleration, has this famous quote, "Crush the infamous thing." And in that quote, he's really talking about the intolerance and what he saw as really ignorance that organized religion often perpetuated. So he's quite critical of the Catholic Church and believes in religious toleration. Denis Diderot, and Diderot is, along with a co-editor, most famous for putting together the Encyclopedia, the 17-volume work that ambitiously tries to arrange the sum of human knowledge alphabetically. And I frequently joke with my students that they don't really know what those are, because everyone walks around with the encyclopedia, in their cell phones. But when I was growing up, it was pretty cool if you had a set of encyclopedias. And we'll touch on him a little bit later in E, the Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And again, trying to see so much we could say about him. He articulates this idea about the noble savage. And this has been exemplified by American Indians who are really living quite simply, that they are using their instincts and emotion rather than reason. So he's a definite later Enlightenment person that we're going to bridge maybe into Romanticism, which we'll be talking about later. And for the Enlightenment, he's known for the social contract. And in the social contract, we'd already talked about that as a concept. And this is actually a work called The Social Contract, where he's arguing about the idea of the general will. And this is the idea that the common good needs to be pursued through the government. So the idea of the general will needing to be realized is his main kind of Enlightenment contribution. So this is just obviously a super quick overview. I'm sure in class you probably read some of the works by these individuals, but just to give you a quick reminder of sort of their major works, major ideas.
Thank you, Katie. We'll pick up the narrative now, talk about the international Enlightenment. And really what that means is the Enlightenment outside of Paris. So there are many strains of Enlightenment, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, and they all sought to reconcile reason with faith. We'll begin with the Scottish Enlightenment, David Hume, Locke, Smith, Hume emphasizes civic morality, religious skepticism. Adam Smith, this is definitely a need to know, wrote Wealth of Nations, where he argued against laws and regulations that prevented commerce from reaching its full capacity. His ideas are like the invisible hand. The market should be monitoring, the market should be the ones regulating economy, not governments regulating economy. In C, there is the American Enlightenment, heavily influenced by the ideas of Locke and by Montesquieu. Locke's thinking about social contract, Montesquieu's arguments about checks and balances in government heavily influenced many Americans, such as Franklin and Jefferson, but many others as well. And then after 1760, Enlightenment ideas are debated in German-speaking states, often with Christian theology. Immanuel Kant is a professor in East Prussia who published the pamphlet, What is Enlightenment? And answering Dare to Know. Kant had some controversial ideas, some that were just flat out wrong, some incorrect ideas about race, which had long-lasting consequences. And for the image then, I was looking at Adam Smith images, and of course he's rather nondescript. There's nothing really distinctive about him in the images you see. So I thought, well, let's find something a little more interesting. And this was a first edition of the Wealth of Nations. Now today it's displayed in The Hague, a Dutch House of Representatives in Hague, but it was found by surprise in the attic of a building used by the House of Representatives. It's worth, well, I'm not even sure how much it's worth, but I mean, that's what we all have up in our attic, our rare books, I'm sure, if we go digging. So, and then this, oh, we're on to Katie.
We are. And so again, we're just really briefly going over this. The image there is sort of in every AP Euro textbook, the iconic image of the salon of Madame Geoffrin in Paris. And you can see in the back of that picture, there's the bust of Voltaire, sort of in the rear there. And so salons offered, there are these gatherings, they disseminated Enlightenment culture, and the women who ran them attracted speakers to stimulate conversation on a wide variety of topics, such as philosophy and politics. And Madame Geoffrin was one of those most famous ones, that she acted as a patroness and hosted these intellectuals. So this moment of being a salon hostess really gave women an opportunity to participate here during the Enlightenment. And then, despite principles of equality, Rousseau offered a lot of controversial arguments for the exclusion of women from political life. He argued that women and men were radically different by nature and should play different roles, and women should be limited to the domestic sphere. So he advocated for women staying out of politics, and he wrote about this. And so it's important to mention Mary Wollstonecraft in D, that in response to this, she rejects Rousseau's view. She first writes thoughts on the education of daughters, and later during the French Revolution, she'll write her really famous work, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. And in A Vindication of the Rights of Women, she argues that only physical strength separates the sexes, and that it's the inequity in educational opportunities. It's the real difference. So she's definitely advocating for women to have access to education the way that men have access to education. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about women when we get to the French Revolution as well. So this is women and how they are really being represented in the Enlightenment through hosting these salons and through some writing.
Thank you, Katie. We're going really fast, I recognize that, but now let's talk about the enlightened despots or enlightened monarchs and enlightened absolutism. And just some context, many philosophers believe that enlightened reform become the way of enlightened monarchs. The philosophers believe that benevolent absolutism offered the best chance for improving society. And the philosophers distrusted the masses, felt that change had to come from above. Keep in mind, as we think about context, this is a time before there's any type of compulsory education for common people. And so the philosophers hold this idea that the masses cannot be trusted, they won't know what's best for them, and that we have to have a benevolent monarch to do that. We'll begin with Frederick the Great of Prussia, used the War of Austrian Succession to expand Prussia into a great power by seizing Silesia. There's the 7 Years' War, which is the American component of that is the French and Indian War. An attempt by Maria Theresa of Austria with the help of France and Russia to regain Silesia, but it fails. Prussia pushes it back. Frederick, as an enlightened despot, allows religious freedom, promotes education, legal reform, and economic growth. Never tries to change Prussia's social structure. And what that means, if you were a serf, you were still going to be a serf. but he does bring in these reforms, which would fit the kind of category of an enlightened monarch. And then we'll move to Catherine the Great of Russia. She will work to import Western culture. She's German by birth, by the way. And she supports the philosophes and begins a program of domestic reform. And so she's very good friends with Voltaire, and she's all about pushing these reforms. However, there's the Pugachev uprising in 1773, which will lead her to reverse the trend toward to reforming serfdom. And she'll engage in a policy of territory expansion, and with Prussia and Austria cover up Poland. And that's the partitions of Poland that I've given you on this map here. So this goes to Prussia, this to the Austrian Habsburgs. You can see Russia creeping in. Before you know it, Poland is almost completely gone.
All right, and then we're going to move to Austria. And you already mentioned Maria Theresa, and she is the monarch prior to our sort of great enlightened monarch. She does start some reforms to make the state stronger and more efficient. She will strengthen the state's central bureaucracy. She begins taxing the nobles, which is a big deal. But it's really her son, Joseph, that is going to take her reforms further and show concrete Enlightenment policies during his rule. So on the right, there's an image, and I know that we have teachers that are watching, so I'm hoping one of you will reach out to me. I don't know a lot of background for this meeting between Frederick the Great, Frederick II, and Joseph II, but the expression that they have is they're sort of embracing each other's hands. If you know the background to this meeting, I would really love for you to email and share it with us. But Joseph II, who's pictured there, is one of the really strong enlightened despots. He does abolish serfdom, and that is a huge thing. He decrees that peasants can pay their landlords in cash rather than forced labor. And he also grants in his edict on toleration, religious toleration to minorities in 1781. He implements liberty of the press and equality before the law. So, and he's only ruling a very short time, just a decade, but a lot of these changes he made were not well received. He does bring in elementary education that's going to be compulsory for boys and girls, and higher education that will be more accessible. Scholarships will be available for poor students, and schools, particularly for Jews, are allowed. So he's implementing a lot of reforms during his reign. Unfortunately, many of them are undone because they rubbed a lot of powerful people the wrong way. So when his brother comes after him, a lot of these reforms are taken back. But he really does bring the ideas of the Enlightenment into his reign in a concrete and solid way. So he's sort of our poster child for enlightened despotism. All right, so again, you can read through this on your own. We'll go over it really quickly. We talked about causes and consequences of Enlightenment thought, the influence of Enlightenment thought on European intellectual development, and forms of political power that were influenced by the Enlightenment with those monarchs at the end of our lesson there. We talked about the reasoning development for causation, and then I think we had many skills in going through the DBQ and going through the content, so you can take a look at those on your own.
Okay, thank you, Katie. So for your homework for tomorrow, and we'll just take a look. We've been working on the sourcing, right? And so many of you talk to us through your emails about, I'm really trying to get my sourcing better. So what I've tried to do here is to give you a structure like we were looking at before. So this is something you want to, kind of take a picture of and write down and start to really internalize when you're doing sourcing. Some steps here. We talk about attribution. Here's some stems to get you in the attribution statement. Then a brief description of the contents of the documents. Then HAP the source, and then why is that important? Why is the H or A or P or P important to your understanding as it relates to the document, claim or argument? And then conclude with the document number in the parenthetical. So this kind of loose structure here will help you with that sourcing. So here's your homework. Source the following document as it relates to an argument about the impact of Enlightenment thought on European society. This is from a short answer question a couple years ago. Document 2. So we've given you a visual source. Again, you're going to have a visual source on the DBQ. This is from Louis Simon Bozat and Liberty Armed with the Scepter of Reason, Striking Down Ignorance and Fanaticism, France, 1793. So use this to write a sourcing paragraph. Use this structure to help you get into that, and submit your responses to the following email, apeuro virtual learning@gmail.com. Please include your first name, school, and state or country, and we'll look at those for tomorrow.
All right, so I get to do the shout outs today, and we're having a cat day. Thank you guys again for all of your submissions. I'm going to start off with Ramapow. Sorry if I mispronounced that. High School in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. They're the Raider Cats. And then Caney Creek High School in Conroe, Texas. They are the Panthers. And then I did see that you picked a Palmetto example, so I'm going to go ahead and shout out to one other Panthers, Miami Palmetto Senior High School. Go Panthers. They're just down the street from me, and great school with a great teacher. Actually, all of these students have excellent teachers that I know personally. So again, thank you guys for all of your hard work and your practice. I hope that you're going to continue it. We're really appreciating all of your efforts.
This is a quick note from a College Board. We know that not all students have access to the internet or a device. We're working on solutions to help students get what they need to show their best work. If you need mobile tools or connectivity or know someone who does, reach out directly to College Board at cb.org/tech. Okay.
Right.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We're excited to look at samples again tomorrow. Katie, I'm going to tell you, the DBQ dance, people liked the DBQ dance.
No, I have to say, people did like the DBQ dance. So I'm sorry. I realized I made fun of you at the end of Friday.
It is meant to be made fun of. It's bad.
I think that's going to have to be a regular Friday thing for the next couple of weeks.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Thank you guys for watching.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Have a great day.